Everyone, please keep your fingers crossed as we attempt to link to the Book of Faces. Thank you for your patience. All right, looking promising. Possibly happening. Please, my apologies for the slight delay. All right, good. As we attempt, good. It is working, excellent. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your patience today. Welcome to our monthly virtual book club. Deborah, that is a glorious, glorious headpiece. We need 2 cameras for it. So good. Dear Sarah Hans, thank you so much for joining us today. You are our author guest. The delightful Bill Bowden has introduced your book to all of us and recommended you to us. So thank you for joining us and becoming our new friend. Today we are discussing Sarah's lovely book, An Ideal Vessel, which is very creepy and perfect, leading up to, I think, leading up to October. So, yes, and if you are on the Book of Faces, I may not catch your comments right away, so please bear with me. Right, so, Sarah, it's so nice to meet you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experiences as an author?
Sure. Thanks for having me first. It's not often that a book club reads one of my books, so it's pretty exciting for me as well. A little bit about me. I've been writing for publication for about 10 years, 10 or 11 years. And I mostly write horror, but I do also write science fiction, fantasy, steampunk. I'm trying to write literary fiction, but I keep wanting to put vampires in it, so that's not going very well. And in my day job, I'm a teacher. Right now I teach special education English to 7th and 8th graders. Bill and I met, I think, through steampunk conventions. So that's where that connection comes from. I used to steampunk cosplay a lot.
Oh, excellent. So I definitely noticed an affinity for horror in this particular tome, and I do want to address that and speak to you about that. But I'd like to talk a little bit about how you found your way to steampunk. You mentioned that you started out by cosplay. Were you brought to steampunk through books or through the power of the costume?
At first, it was definitely the costumes. And then when I started writing with an eye for publication, a couple of the first pieces that I wrote were a little more steampunk leaning, and so I've written quite a few stories at this point that are steampunk, but they tend towards steampunk horror, and a lot of people will read one or the other, but they won't. You know, if they like steampunk, they won't read horror. Horror is difficult for a lot of people. So, I just wrote a story actually that I set in a kind of a steampunk world because I realized I hadn't done one in a while, and I was sort of itching to get back to that Victorian feel.
Wonderful. And will we be able to expect that one coming to publication soon?
I'm not sure when it's going to be published, probably sometime next year. I don't know if I'm allowed to announce this yet, but so sorry to the editor if I'm not, but the story is called Chorus of Whispers, and it'll be in the anthology Stitched Lips, which will be edited by Ken McGregor, who's a good friend of mine. And I'm really excited about it. I love it when I know the editor, because I can really get crazy and and put it in a steampunk universe and really just get nuts with it and be really silly. And I know that if I go too far, they'll say, look, I really love this, except for the part that's really ridiculous. Can you rewrite that? Like, so it's a little less scary than submitting to an editor that you don't know. And so I had a lot of fun writing it.
Oh, excellent. Well, I, for one, am very excited to read more by you.
Thanks.
I will admit that I am one of those readers that you mentioned who normally reads not horror. I very rarely read horror, but I love Sherry Priest, and she is also a horror writer who came to steampunk. I wonder if you have an affinity with her works, if you've read her and you feel a sort of kinship with her style of bringing a little bit of the gothic and the sort of grotesque into the steampunk.
Yeah, I actually I like Sherry a lot. She's really fun to be on panels with, and her Twitter is great. And I still have not read her Lizzie Borden books. I bought both of them, and she signed them for me, and they're on my bookshelf, and I still have not read them. So, but I really loved her vampire series. Actually, has anybody read her vampire books? Because they're like, nobody knows about them. So I'm glad that you've read them at least, because I'm always like, if you like urban fantasy, like, what are you doing? You got to read the Sherry Priest vampire books. They're wonderful.
Well, more people need to read them so that she can publish more too.
Right? They're really good. I describe them as like a great summer read because they're not going to change your life, but they're really fun and kind of a different take on vampires. And I really enjoyed them.
But and I think that they are, whilst they do deal with vampires, they are not so harrowing as Maplecroft, by the by, which I don't want to take up all the time with you speaking about another author, although we both clearly love her. And I can agree with everyone, her Twitter feed is the best. Her dog, fantastic. So, and I personally think that you do need to write that literary fiction with the vampires, and we'll just read it. It's fine. So, what brought you to writing horror? Is that something you loved growing up? Was it an easy thing for you to fall into writing?
I think so. The sort of like, I don't know, junction of my brain is like Anne of Green Gables and Christopher Pike.
Oh.
If you mash those together, that's what's going on in here. So, so steampunk horror is kind of a natural fit for me. And I just, I really like character-driven stories. And when I first started out writing for publication, I was more drawn to the horror prompts than I was to any of the other prompts. And I tried really hard not to be a horror writer and to write something else. But everything would always end really unhappily, and there were always like demons and stuff. So eventually I just gave up and was like, I guess I'm a horror writer. And that's kind of how it happens. That's how you find your genre. By accident. What comes out when I sit down to write to a prompt? Is it scary? I guess I'm a horror writer. So yeah. I have been lately, I've been trying to write more happy endings just because real life is so much of a bummer right now. So I've actually written a few like hopeful stories. And when I started writing romance, I have some romance short stories, and obviously you have to have at least a happily for now at the end of that. So like the story will, like I have a couple stories where the world ends, or there's this horrific conflict, but the lovers are fine at the end, and that's about as close to a happy ending as I get. Is the world has fallen apart, but it's okay for these two people.
I love it. Well, I look forward to reading some more of your works. Maybe the romance are going to be a bit more my cup of, since I don't normally read horror. Although I did enjoy this month's book very much, and I loved that you set it during the World's Fair, which is, I think, something really rife with possibility for steampunk. I'm wondering how your research process went for this particular book, and how much you drew from reality versus the fantastical?
That's a good question. So this story, a lot of times what happens with my stories is I have like a thing that I really want to write about, and then I find an anthology prompt or another idea, and they sort of mush together. And so I had just read The Devil in the White City by Larson, which is a wonderful nonfiction book, especially if you just sort of skim the architecture parts and go straight to the serial killer bits. And so I had just read that, so it was, you know, really in my mind, and I got the invitation to an anthology that was about demon hunters that would cross universes. So in sort of a multiverse situation, and these demon hunters are following the demons to any universe that you can think of, which is perfect for steampunk. And so I just sort of put the two ideas together. Archibald Campion is based on a real person from the World's Fair chapters of that book. And then obviously H.H. Holmes was a real person as well. And his murder hotel was very real.
So I was familiar with Devil in the White City and H.H. Holmes and his murder hotel, which is something one never expects to talk about over a cup of tea, but here we are. But I was wondering if Professor Champion was a real character, and how much you drew from his life, and his deceased wife. Was she also a real figure? Was there that relationship with their work?
Professor Campion was based on someone who had automatons at the World's Fair, if I'm remembering correctly. I wrote the story more than 10 years ago, so it's been a minute. But I sort of just elaborated from there. I just took creative liberties at that point. I took his name.
That was enough. That's lovely. Well, Sarah, I'm not going to monopolize the entire conversation, but I always like to start things off with a few questions from me before opening it up to everyone else. They know what's coming. They know I'm going to ask them questions and have them ask you questions. We are a very, very merry bunch, and everyone is a delight. They also know I'm cheeky and shameless, so that I will come to them with questions. But I'd like to start with Bill, since you are co-hosting today. Bill, do you have any questions for Sarah as we're getting started?
No, I actually don't. Sarah and I are friends, and we talk kind of regularly, in fact. So unfortunately, I don't have anything prepared for that. So I'm sorry about that.
No, I'll give you time. You have time, Bill. You have time.
Okay.
No pressure, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. I'll come up with something else.
Thank you.
Yeah, go on to another person and then come back to me later.
All right. Oh, but are you drinking tea today? That's the other thing. Everyone, if you're drinking tea, you must tell me what you're drinking. Bill, you've muted yourself. Are you good? There you are.
Did I?
No, you're fine. There's just a lag.
No. I'm drinking water.
Oh, water. Oh, well, nice if you want to be healthy. All right, Lady June.
I drink too much soda, so.
Oh, too much soda. Well, you have to balance it out.
I have to moderate myself a bit.
Absolutely. Lady June Squirrel, hello. Are you having an IPA? Excellent.
Always the IPA, always.
Fantastic. So my dear friends, one of the longest term book club members, the OG book club from like very first book club almost 10 years ago. Would you share today what a favorite moment was in the book for you?
I didn't like the book.
Oh, all right. That's all right. It is
I know that this doesn't happen very often, but And it is a problem when we have the author here. I feel like I can't really say anything. But I read Devil in the White City, and I
Mhm.
felt like I had had enough of H.H. Holmes for the rest of my life.
He's very,
That
very
is valid. That is very valid.
And so
He was
when
a really bad man.
I got to that part of it, it was like, and then here's this guy creating automatons to be like his wife, and maybe you should move on to somebody else.
all right, Lady Jupiter.
I'm sorry. I'll read other things that you've written. Sweet vampire romances that end happily. I'd like that.
Perfect. All right, dear Laura, would you like to share a favorite moment in the book?
Sure. I really like the beginning where Susanna is by herself in the electric building and she's sweeping up and just, you know, all of her attention to detail, and you can really tell a lot about her personality just from that opening scene. I really liked that. And then having Elspeth come to life suddenly, I thought that was really cool.
Oh yes. Oh yes. So let's see here. Karen, and another author and one of our early guests to the book club. Hello, my dear. In
Hello.
Adelaide.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. It's something like 9 a.m. for you, isn't it?
It's now about 9:20, yes.
Oh my goodness. Well,
In-
thank you for being up so early to join us. Would you like to share one of your favorite moments in the book?
Well, I'm not a real, okay, I was gonna say I'm not really into horror anyway, although I have written Dr. Jack, but yeah, anyway. I'm not like June where I didn't like the book, but I can't get into first person present tense. A lot of issues with that, and I'm sure you hear this a lot because it is a thing. I just don't, yeah. But weirdly, when you got to H.H. Holmes, I went, oh, because I've actually done a lot of research on him before, have considered using him, well, the situation. And of course, it was at the World Fair, and I have a thing about world fairs, you know. So I think the setting of the World Fair with the automatons, and I suppose it wasn't a favourite thing about mine being horror, but I just thought it was quite interesting because I had done that research on H.H. Holmes, and I'm going, I know lots about this already. So that situation. So, you know, I was waiting for the murder hotel and how you were going to do that. And but yes, I'm not a big horror person as such. I sort of, when I do that sort of stuff, I don't call mine horror. I call mine dark mysteries, I think. Yes, I'm not a real horror person. So yeah, I think it was the fact that I knew the setting, because of course not being American, there could be lots of settings you could have used that I had no knowledge about, but that one she did have knowledge about. So yeah, and it was yeah.
Thank you very much, Karen. All right, now I'm going to move to Jeanette, my dear Jeanette. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I am great, actually.
Great. Would you like to share a favorite moment in the book with all of us?
You know, I like this whole story, honestly. I love this kind of grim, not super gross, but scary story. So I really enjoyed the whole thing. But I want to say, I think my favorite moment is the very last one, where the two look at each other through the window and they know what's going to happen sometime in the future. Well, the husband has no clue, where he just is in total denial and is just not getting it. I think that was really my favorite. And I also really liked how all the robots are female. I'm like, that's right. So something you may not know about me is I do historical martial arts. I beat boys with swords for fun. So I was like, yes, the best. So no, I really enjoyed the story a lot. I actually didn't even get to read it until today, but I zoomed through it and really enjoyed it a lot.
Awesome, thanks. It's funny, I actually I write about robots pretty frequently.
Okay, cool.
And they're almost always female.
Oh.
And I had to at one point be like, I should write a boy robot. This looks really sexist. So I like intentionally wrote a story about a boy robot just to fill things out. So it wouldn't look like I could only write about girl robots.
Well, I just think it's cool because, you know, women are, you know, where we get babies from, and also so they are the life side, but then it's really cool when you get this female robot who's completely the opposite of that. You know, so I really like that contrast. So no, that's pretty cool. I like it.
Thanks.
As an aside, I had to read this book when the sun was up. I could not read it when the sun.
Oh,
I really,
such a delicate flower, Jocelyn. Such a delicate flower.
Yeah, no, I also cannot read Maplecroft and Showpriest horror. I know it's not even that horrific, but I'm still on the edge of my seat, biting my nails. So, and this is the same for me.
Try watching Lovecraft Country.
Yeah,
I'm reading
so
that
scary.
right now.
Oh my God.
I just started reading that.
I haven't read the book, but boy, I've been watching the HBO, and oh my God.
Oh, great. Yeah,
The book is wonderful.
Watching it after I finish the book.
I'll have to read the book. Really excellent. I can only watch it when the sun is up. So,
I found the Jim Crow scarier than the Lovecraft parts.
Well, the Jim Crow is the true.
Well, that is
part of the. I think
the
point of the whole
that's
deal.
The point of it. That's the point.
It's on my watch list. I'm not quite sure now. It looked interesting.
It's beautifully written. It's wonderfully acted. It's terrifying, and Jim Crow is definitely the true villain.
It's very intense. It's very intense.
So,
maybe Karen doesn't understand what Jim Crow is. Jim Crow is not a person. It is a time frame in which after the Civil War, blacks in America up into the 20th century with the 50s were lynched and demeaned.
Okay.
It's not a person, so you don't need to worry about it spoiling.
It's all that separate but equal bullshit they had going on.
Right. Yes.
It's
cultural differences.
So as a quick aside, because I don't want to take us too far from our wonderful book, Jim Crow is what the series of laws were called in the southern part of the United States, by which they enacted their own version of apartheid, essentially, in short. So,
okay.
Yeah, apartheid. Yeah, no, we'll call it there's really, you cannot put a euphemism on it. It's just horrible. So, but do watch it if you like that sort of thing. It's very good. And if you liked this novel, you will likely enjoy the TV show, to be honest. So, to move on, lest we turn into a Lovecraft country fan group, Cindy, my dove, would you like to join us and share a thing you enjoyed about the book today?
Well, again, I'm in the not horror fan. I can handle werewolves and vampires. Can't do zombies and demons and serial killers are a no for me. Like, I could not watch those shows. I see things behind the furniture. Like,
oh yes,
much of a vivid imagination. Now, I did enjoy the characters in the book, particularly Susanna. I loved her transformation throughout the book, from rather meek and drab and with no real path or focus. She was simply beaten down, and to where she ended up, quite different. So I love seeing her transformation and seeing things from her point of view. I actually enjoyed the first person. I have to say though, the thing I liked the least was the ending, because I hate unresolved endings. I hate when it's left, and I want it to be wrapped up,
Yeah, I didn't understand.
If it's a series, okay, when I know I can read the next one and I'm going to see what's happened. But I I hate when things are left to my imagination because I have too much.
I thought you were going to do a sequel.
Yeah, well, a lot of my stories end kind of ambiguously. That's just I like ambiguous story endings because then I get to like imagine what I want to happen. And so you can imagine it how you want. If you're more of a horror person, you can imagine that like things do not work out. If you want a happy ending, you can assume that they managed to get an exorcism and everything works out great and everyone's happy and you know, Archie and Susanna go off and ride off into the sunset together. But this was originally written as 3 short stories. That's why there's part 1, part 2, and part 3. And so there was a 4th volume, and I didn't know how many volumes they were going to continue to do. So I sort of had to leave it with a little bit of a cliffhanger just in case I ended up writing another story. But that could be a fun world to revisit, you know, 10 plus years later to add a little bit more to the story. So thanks, Cindy. That's actually could be really fun.
But I must say, Sarah, that I would happily read more about these characters. I would love to know what happens. And I have filled in a happy ending, to be honest. I am guilty of giving them a happy ending. So, Alan, hello, my friend, with the perfect backdrop.
Thank you. I was excited to read this book, but unfortunately I didn't get to it. But I have read The Devil in the White City, and maybe I'm kind of different from this crowd because I'm an engineer by training, so I really love the architecture parts and the program management. That's what really I found most exciting. So maybe I'm the only one that thought that, but
No,
I'm sure you're not.
I prefer the architecture too. I thought it was really cool. The
Well, and
electric
that book
lights.
has won so many awards. Right.
so I look forward to getting at it, although I'm a very slow reader, so when it's on text, not very good eyes anymore. But are you local?
I live in Ohio.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, then thank you for being so far away and still joining us.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, there's Zoom.
Yeah.
So I think I've actually, since the pandemic, I've actually seen more of my friends that live far away, which is interesting because before we only saw each other at conventions a few times a year, and now we Zoom call each other all the time. So it's interesting how that sort of changed our interactions.
A little bit of a silver lining in these difficult times. And Alan, I'm so glad you came, regardless of finishing the book. You have plenty of time to read it at your leisure. I think you will like it. It's beautifully written. And you certainly see some engineering from our main professor. So you have that to look forward to. All right, so Alicia, hello, how are you?
I'm good so far.
Excellent. Would you like to share something you enjoyed about the book?
Yes, one of the scenes that I really liked was when they're calling up the Will-o'-the-Wisp. I thought it had a lot of tension, it had a lot of action. I just liked the way it sort of all came out. It sort of just kind of pulled you in and just, you know, I liked that little bit of tension and action and bit in the story.
Excellent. No, I love the Will-o'-the-Wisp as well.
Thanks. That was one of those things where I went, well, now I have to get them to change locations.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? You know, and you kind of have to come up with a solution that works for those characters that they would use. And so I'm glad that you enjoyed that scene, because sometimes you feel like when you write those, you're like, is everyone going to know that this is blue? Like that this is a, you know, marching to Isengard scene?
Yeah, I kind of got that, but it didn't, I didn't feel that it took away from the story in any way. It was just I mean, sometimes you do. And then of course, I can't get it because my D&D books are out in the garage buried underneath stuff. And I'm like, I know this spell. Which spell is this? It's like, no, I don't need to look that up. Just keep reading.
That's delightful detail. Thank you, Alicia. And I want to share that you have some comments on the Book of Faces. Sarah, Tracy Benton says, thank you for explaining the structure so well, Sarah. And that she liked it very much. And Rachel Rose is here as well. She's very excited about the girl robots. She says they make far more sense as well. So you have some friends in the comments. Robin, hello, Robin. Oh, she might be talking to her cat right now. There are quite a few of us with cats.
Actually, I was asking my husband, who has a very large collection of D&D books, what the spell is. He thinks it's summon monster, but he's double checking. He confirms it's summon monster. His next response was, wait, what level? Oh, no, wait, don't ask. I'll check it out later.
Robin, now that you've resolved some of our D&D quandaries for us, thanks to your husband, would you like to share something you enjoyed about the book today?
Well, it's kind of, I liked the fact that at the end, the character going by the name of Elspeth figured out how to inhabit a woman. He's admitted that one of the problems and the reasons why this one demon had been allowed to go was because the spell was meant to be done by a woman. And it's kind of obvious this is a male or kind of male adjacent sort of character, although you don't ever really get a sense of, is this person human? Are they a spirit? Are they an angel? Are they another demon? I was actually flashing back and thinking it was something like Vivian Shaw's Greta Helsing series. Part of the books end up going back and forth between hell, and there's kind of like a division of hell that kind of oversee everything and make sure there aren't holes in the universe. And one of the characters kind of ends up being in charge of that division and going back and forth. And I'm like, wait, like, is this person trying to make sure that, you know, other demons aren't going bad? Are they not? And that didn't get resolved. But I kind of like the fact of figuring out, okay, it's, you know, Susanna is the one who still is the demon, which means they can't leave. So it's okay. Well, I better figure out how to get to a woman because we gotta get this done at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robin. Excellent. Deborah, I do love this headpiece that you're wearing today. It's wonderful.
That is insane.
So good. It's so big. I love big. Deborah, I know you like horror because we talked about this. So would you like to share one of your favorite parts or part you liked about the book today?
Yeah, I definitely do like horror. I like anything that's got magic in it and, you know, alternate universes and all of that. It's really interesting to me. I think the thing that I got kind of hooked on was the whole idea of who Elspeth was, where she came, you know, where was she before she came to consciousness in the automaton. And I really enjoyed that whole figuring it out and awakening and trying to make sense of where she was, because it's not the normal place that she winds up. And I really am curious about her whole culture, the culture that she comes from. And I like to think about like how freaking hard it would be to wake up somewhere in some, you know, in a whole other body, and, you know, how does it work? Are all the limbs there and all of the, you know, like there's all kinds of ways that could go. So I love that part, and I would really love to read more about where she came from and like some sort of catalog of experiences that she had in different bodies and different locations, like planetary, you know, like if she was an aquatic being at one point or something, you know, it could go anywhere, obviously, but I really loved that part of the story.
Thanks. I wish I could take credit for the like multiverse demon hunters, but that came from the editor of the anthology. That was the first story, was a story about these demon hunters, and the demons had managed to escape through the multiverse. And so the idea was that then the demon hunters followed them, and I just wanted to do something unique because it was sort of a medieval fantasy world that they came from. So I figured the editor would probably get a lot of submissions set in medieval fantasy worlds. And so I wanted to do something that was really different from that. And I struggled at first to come up with like, how am I gonna justify this this human soul being in an automaton? So that's kind of where the organs came in, so that I could justify a person's consciousness jumping into an inanimate object. Fortunately, the editor really liked it, so it worked.
Oh, it worked very well. It was horrifying. It made me think of Dr. Frankenstein, frankly. I thought it was a really good detail.
Great, thanks. I still remember writing the part where he opens the hatch and like there's organs pulsing in there, and that even creeped me out. I was like, I don't know, the organs. Like that's when you know you're really writing good horror, though, is when you're like, that's gross. I'm kind of creeping myself out.
No, body horror, that sort of a variety of horror I find the most difficult to read. So I did have to set the book down for a moment, leave the experience, have some tea before I could go forward. But I finished it. So all right, Scarlett, hello. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't think you've been before, so thank you for joining us today. Would you like to share something you really enjoyed about the book?
Yes, thank you. It is my first time. I really liked the growth of the other female character that starts with a Z, and I've lost the word. The growth that she did on, because she went from not knowing what's going on, dealt with it, and then took it upon herself to figure out how to get to the next step in that next story without a lot of help or assistance. So like just the growth of that character was really intriguing. I was also really intrigued by the concept of other experiences that the Elsbeth character had.
Excellent. Thank you, Scarlett. And thank you so much for joining us for the first time this month. I hope you will be back. All right, Cindy Joy, hello, good to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, I think.
Yeah, I think.
Clockwork Alchemy last year, maybe? No.
Gaslight Expo.
San Diego, down in San Diego, Gaslight.
Yes, Gaslight Expo. But it's very good to see you, Cindy Joy. Would you like to share something you enjoyed about the book today?
Well, I liked how lighthearted it was and how quickly it moved.
The pace is very important.
No, so I actually set aside a book that I'm reading for another book club to pick this one up when I realized I only had a week. And that book, I was having a lot of problems getting through it. And this is lighthearted and quick moving compared to what I was reading. So don't pick up Mexican Gothic.
Oh no.
I did not like it.
That is not a light read.
That is not a light read. So, but yeah, so that one is next week. But this one, I really liked the development of the characters through the stories and the development of the relationships between the characters. And I really, yeah, so if you ever decide to revisit these characters, I want to see what else they do. So yeah, and I liked the setting of the World Fair and the automatons, and that they were all women, which everyone else has covered already. But that's what happens when you're towards the end of the line. But I thought the pacing was really nice, and I guess that's part of the whole anthology thing, is that you got these like short segments that you've got to get your story out.
Yeah, I tend to write really fast-paced stories. I have ADHD, so my stories tend to just fly. And I wrote a story with Maurice Baradas. I don't know if you guys have read any of his stuff yet, but we wrote a story together. And when we were discussing it, I was like, so my strength is that my stories are rocket ships. They, like, a lot of stuff happens very quickly. And he said, well, my weakness is that nothing happens in my stories. So this will go perfectly. And it did, actually, because like I would write plot and then he would go in and add just a ton of description and slow everything down. So that actually really taught me a lot about my writing style. And I think my pace has slowed down a little bit as a result, because I'm always going back and adding the description later. And yeah, so I like a story that's fast paced myself. I struggled with the beginning of Mexican Gothic as well. It does pick up, though.
I'm halfway through it now, so.
And that's about the point that it starts to pick up and stuff gets real creepy real fast. So so I promise, keep going. It's worth it. It's really good. But yeah, I struggle sometimes with the Gothic horror because I'm like, oh God, would something just happen now, please? And I struggle with like Victorian style writing as well, because, you know, like H.P. Lovecraft, man, they were getting paid by the word, and you can tell.
Yeah.
And they also were all like high on cocaine. So they were just writing for days, like just repeating themselves over and over and over. And that's just really hard for me. So yeah, so thanks. It's interesting that you noticed
the
the
story
pacing.
structures are different too in Victorian. There's a lot of there's not the whole, you've got this thing now where you've got a plot and you've got to have these elements and it's got to have this story arc, and Victorian literature just didn't really do that.
Yeah, that was back when they thought, well, if I'm writing a novel, let's start with the person's born and then it'll be over when they die. I'll write their whole life. It'll be like 10,000 pages.
That would be hard for vampires then, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really would.
Well, thank you so much, Cindy Joy. That was great commentary. I'm going to move along to our dear Selena. Hello, how are you, Selena?
Hello. So I really enjoyed the description of the world. And I'm sitting, I'm in Phoenix. It's over 100 degrees. So when I'm reading the parts about, stomping through the snow, it was great because it's really hot here. And I could still feel the snow because you were still very good at those descriptions. The only thing is the world right now is so depressing that was why I didn't like the book. The writing was great, and I would love to read other things that you may have written that has a happier ending. It's just this time in regular world, I like to read things that I can kind of ignore what's going on outside. And so that was the only reason why I didn't like the book, just because of that. But the writing was good. And I liked the characters, and I liked the description, and I liked being in like each of those parts. You got to know a little bit more about the character themselves deep inside, as if they weren't just this, very shallow character. So I did like that. It's just depressing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, that's the hard thing about horror, right? Is that it usually, I actually saw someone once define horror as a story with an unhappy ending. That's it. That's all it takes. And I thought, wow. I mean, okay. I don't think that's necessarily true, but yeah, it's kind of the standard in horror for you to leave at least an ambiguous ending, if not an ending that's really unhappy. And that's a struggle that I've had when I write cross-genre stuff like this is several times my stories have been rejected by horror markets for having a happy ending, but then I can't sell it anywhere else because it's too scary for fantasy and science fiction readers. So if I write something that's got scary elements, I usually have to put an unhappy ending on it. Otherwise the horror readers will be disappointed. I don't know. The only story that I've ever sold to a major pro magazine though was a story I sold to Pseudopod that in my opinion has a happy ending, and at least has a hopeful ending. The character kind of finds what she's supposed to be doing with her life, and so I feel like, well, I'm just going to keep putting like happy-ish endings on things, and because you can never tell. So that was feedback that I kept getting over and over again. But then the one thing that I did manage to sell to Pseudopod had kind of a hopeful ending. And I'm hoping that now we're kind of, because things are so depressing and bleak right now, that more hopeful stuff, even if the story itself is horrific, if there's a happy ending, that there will be more of a market for that, because I really do like writing happy endings for my characters. I get really attached to them. I at least want them to be okay, even if everything else is crap.
Thank you for that insight, because not being a horror reader normally, I had no idea that was a sort of genre standard, and I was really going to ask you about what are some horror stories with happy endings, but apparently they are.
There aren't many.
So I feel like older horror stories did sometimes have at least happy-ish endings. Like the horror that I read in the 80s, there was at least some positive resolution at the end. In Poltergeist, the ghost is gone and everything's going to be okay now, right? Well, but I guess that's not the thing anymore.
It's kind of different between movies and novels and short stories, right?
That's
because
true.
Movies and novels, you get to know the characters over such a long period of time that your reader feels really upset and cheated if there isn't at least a little bit of hope at the end.
Right. That makes sense.
But in a short story, it's like a flash in the pan.
That's true.
And if someone wants to be horrified, then you got to leave them with that horrified feeling at the end, right? Yeah. So.
Okay, no, that makes more sense, because I was like, what are you talking about? I've seen Pet Cemetery and all that. Things kind of turned out okay.
I think that's probably why I don't read a lot of horror, because I don't like the endings. And big, okay, but yeah, just.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have seen the new Pet Cemetery movie since you brought that up, Jeanette.
Nope.
But I loved it because it has a really, like, the ending is really hopeless and that's I because I'm a big horror reader and a big horror fan. I love an ending that really just like kicks you in the stomach.
Oh wait, I'm sorry, I missed what you were saying. Which movie was that?
The new Pet Cemetery.
Oh yeah, movie. I did not watch it.
Has a really grim ending. I loved it. I loved it over the old one. Yeah, I thought they did a really good job, but it's very grim. and I tend to like a grim ending most of the time, especially when I'm reading or watching horror, because it just, I don't know, it gives me that like frisson that I'm looking for.
Right. Great. So to bring up yet another cool recent book, I've just read the Gideon the Ninth and Harold the Ninth books, and they kind of have that same ambiguous ending and also not so happy ending. So I'm really hoping that the third book in the trilogy resolves some of that weirdness, but based on her writing style and etc., I'm not hopeful.
It probably will. It probably will resolve with at least something positive.
I hope so. Man, I love these books.
That's
are
pretty
so
rare.
Great and so weird, and I love them. So I'm hoping that we at least get a happy ending for somebody.
Well, thank you.
Like the end of the Magician's TV show.
Oh yeah.
One or two characters got happy endings, and that was it.
No,
and that's not even a horror show.
No, it's not.
No, actually, there's.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead, Sarah.
Oh,
that was Alicia. I think, or Alicia.
I want to get Anne in before we continue on this because Anne has not had an opportunity to make her first comment yet. She's been waiting very patiently. So Anne, hello. Thank you for waiting so patiently to our tangents and our wonderful conversation. Would you like to share something you enjoyed about the book today?
Once again, I bought the book, but I've not read it yet.
That's all right.
But I am spending my time here with my book club family while I eat dinner. So that's why I'm here. And I love hearing all the people's ideas about it, because then when I go to read it, I'll have more of a fuller experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and I'm so glad that you're here. Just as a note, for those of you who are here for the first time or are newish still, you never have to read or finish the book. I am not your English teacher. I will not be grading you. I don't want to grade you. I don't want to read your homework. I've done that thing. I don't like it. I'm not going to give you any scores or quizzes or tests. We just want you to come and have a good time, meet the authors, participate in conversation. So thank you, Anne, for believing me and for being here. And I am sorry, Alicia, I cut you off, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to share at least once before we continued with that train of thought.
No, that's okay. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay. Just we were talking about horror, and it's interesting. One of the reasons I don't read a lot of new horror is because the endings tend to be, it's either ambiguous or I never like how it resolves. I guess I've noticed in a lot of the newer horror, whether the ending's good or bad, it doesn't ever seem to end. But one thing I liked about this, even though it is horror, is it's a completely different setting. Although H.H. Holmes is a good, because I know quite a bit about him and that period and Chicago. So it was interesting reading that, going, yeah, I can, yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think I'm the weirdo here in that, I can sit and watch documentary on whatever while eating dinner.
I don't know that any of us could claim to be the weirdo here. I think weird.
It's just,
yeah.
I don't think horror bothers me as much as like certain things do. I admit Salem's Lot creeped me out, but I think it's because I was reading it by myself at night, and I didn't hear my parents pull into the driveway when they came home. So when the door opened, that book went across the room, and I screamed.
Oh my goodness!
Because I was so engrossed in the book that I heard nothing, and then all of a sudden the door opened, and I realized it was like 11:30, and there were no lights on in the house, and I was supposed to be in bed, and I wasn't.
That is a sign of a good read for certain. So we are coming up on our we're coming up on the hour mark, and Tracy says, "Let us not have a weirdo competition, my friends. Indeed, we're all weird here." Delightful. Tracy also adds that she does not generally read horror, but she really enjoyed this book for the automaton action. Yes. Automaton action. Delightful. Before we wrap up and go on, we do sometimes run over into another 30 minutes if people are amenable. But Bill and I have a special feature we would like to share with all of you at the end. So we can either share that now, or if you'd like to continue and Sarah is amenable, we will continue for another 20 minutes, and then Bill and I will share our extra special new thing that we're going to do.
20 minutes is fine with me, as long as we're done before Lovecraft Country.
Oh, all right.
Comes on at 9.
Record it.
I just watch it on HBO Max when the lights are on.
Yes, I have to watch it when the sun is up and the lights are on and the cats are near. So, Sarah,
Sylvester doesn't bother as long as he gets worship, because he has decided he will show himself in the brand new little cat bed that we bought that the two cats have ignored the last 3 days, and now Sylvester's declared it his.
He loves it.
Oh, look at him. Love.
What a cutie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he knows it.
I miss my tuxedo cat.
Tracy has requested the special thing now and then more discussion. Sarah, how do you feel about that proposal?
That's fine.
All right.
Then I get to see the special thing.
You get to hear the special thing. So Bill and I have been discussing that there just is not enough time to read and recommend all of the books we would like to read and recommend to you wonderful humans in the book club. And so each month, as well as our primary book club read, Bill and I are going to bring an additional review for you of something steampunk or steampunk adjacent that you might enjoy. So Bill, would you like to share your extra special steampunk read for this month?
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. My pick for this month is the Pretoria Event by Jeffrey Mandragora or Mandragora. Yes, it's a pen name. In this book, we are introduced to Ian Rollins, who's a commander in the Royal Navy and currently imprisoned by German forces. And he's under suspicion of piracy. He's being held in the airship His Majesty Kaiser Wilhelm I on its way to German-controlled territory. The charges are trumped up, of course, but short of a miracle, there's little Commander Rollins can do to escape his fate, which seems like it's going to be a long drop at the end of a noose. To make matters worse, Rollins is forced to help the Germans when a catastrophic engine failure causes fatal injuries among the engineering staff aboard. Rollins must use his formidable skills to keep the airship in the sky, although it will surely mean his death if they reach their destination. Also captured is Daniela Tesla, cousin of the famous inventor and a skilled mechanical engineer in her own right. She and Rollins have a bit of history together, and the two will need to put their skills and significant brain power to work to escape the clutches of the airship's crew. They're being taken to South Africa, a German colonial holding in this story, and no one on board is prepared for the horrific surprise that awaits them all when they land in Pretoria. So, at just a smidge over 200 pages, the Pretoria Event is not an overly long read. The characters are interesting and have depth, and the plot moves right along. It's theoretically a sequel to The Thunderbolt Affair, which I haven't finished reading yet, and does vaguely reference some of the events in that novel, but the Pretoria Event stands on its own without the need to read any other book to understand what's going on. Available to order anywhere books are sold or obtainable directly from the publisher, which is Ross Wyvern Press. I heartily recommend the Pretoria Event for any fan of steampunk.
Thank you very much, Bill. Excellent. And we will share these and links, etc., in the book club group. So I, of course, am an inveterate digital reader, so I don't know if this would be visible.
No.
No. Right.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Sorry.
No. It's all right, because I'm going to tell you the title. So The Poppy War by Rf Fong. It's a wonderful sort of steampunk adjacent read, rather than purely steampunk, set in China after what would be the Opium Wars in our timeline and history. And so it is taken from a Chinese perspective, written by a Chinese author, and it is not strictly steampunk, although there is some fantastical technology. There's more magic than technology, and it's rooted in ideas of shamanism. I really love this book. The writing is gorgeous. The characters are fascinating and deep and complicated. It is also a challenging read. It is not universally happy. So if you are feeling the need for something a little bit lighter in your reading, this may not be the book for you this moment, although I highly recommend you do pick it up. I'm not going to give you a summation of the plot because it's very complicated, but we do follow our heroine from her humble origins as an orphan to being a hero for her people against corrupt outside forces that represents the spectres of colonialism. And I always like to see colonialism quashed. So I was big fan of that. There is a follow-up to this book I am excited to read. I haven't picked it up, The Burning God.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say, worth the read. Bring your handkerchief, keep your pots of tea full. It's hard to put down once you get going, but don't read it if you're feeling the need for something a little bit lighter, a little bit more comic, a little bit more hopeful. It is absolutely epic fiction, a little sword and sorcery with a side of mad science, so an alt history. That's my recommendation, and we will share those, the titles, the authors, and links on the Virtual Book Club group. So thank you, Bill, who suggested we have these additional reads every month, and we will be bringing those to you for the foreseeable future. All right, so to return to our wonderful discourse with dear Sarah, thank you, Sarah. I normally open this up to all of you, my darlings, if you have questions for the author. So hopefully you've had a moment to think about some questions that you might like to propose. You can raise your hand physically, or it turns out that there is a feature where you can raise your hand using the power of Zoom. Bill, would you like to start us off?
Yes, I would. I don't have a question for Sarah, but I did want to say that I really enjoyed this book a great deal, and I think we talked a little bit at World Horror about it, Sarah. But I loved the ambiguous ending. I loved how it's, you know, the two women, the characters, are kind of looking at each other through the window, and you're sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop, wondering how it's going to play out. That was just, I sat there and thought about it for a good 20 minutes, thinking about, you know, different possibilities of what could happen to that. I enjoyed that a lot. I loved the descriptions of the World's Fair itself, even the architectural ones. And I read Devil in the White City too, and am just fascinated by what would cause a person to go that far off the rails, you know, as H.H. Munro did. It's incredible. The site of his murder hotel right now is a post office, and it is probably the most haunted post office in North America. There's really chilling stories that come out of that place, of experiences that people have had there. Just the stuff that went on is horrific, and it's, you know, all of the sort of stereotypes that we hear about things serial killers do. This guy did back in 1893, I think it was.
I think so.
It's mind-boggling, and I thought you sort of stitched those elements together really well, along with the sort of extra dimensional demon hunter. So I enjoyed it a lot, and well done. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. That's very kind. I was really pleased to hear how much everyone liked Susanna. She's one of my favorite characters that I've written. I really think I really like books and stories about older characters. I read a lot of young adult because I love the pace of it, and I love reading first person, and usually young adult is that first person present tense that I really like. I don't write in first person present tense all the time, I promise. But I love to read it because it's so fast paced. And so I wish that like adult writers would do that same thing with adult characters. And this was sort of a, like, I don't know, I want more stories about working class women in their 30s who are like tough as nails and can kick your ass if they wanted to, but like they have to sweep the floor, you know, it's a bummer. So so I wanted her to be really capable and really resourceful in the way that like working class women really are. And so I'm thrilled that everyone sort of really responded so positively to her. That's
Yeah,
thrilling.
that was great, except that you left her as a wild woman in a window that made me very upset. I mean, it was like she paid for having been an uppity woman. That's one of those things that bothered me.
Yeah, I could see why you would think that. For me, it was more like Zuzana is the only one who's strong enough to have this demon inside of them and not be completely possessed. So
well,
she
maybe
is still fighting that demon, even though it's like in her in a way that nobody else, like if it had taken over Archie, he would have just like immediately given in to it, you know. So yeah, and then it being a horror story, I had to kind of leave it on a scary ending. And I thought the worst thing is when the character that you like is the one that ends up in trouble, that ends up distressed. So it was sort of the worst ending I could think of. Sorry.
It's a very hard ending, and I know I put it down thinking, I hope she has a sequel. I want to see Lana be rescued or to rescue herself. So, Selena, I think you put your hand up. Is that right?
Oh, a quick aside, Madame Askew, we seem to have lost the Facebook feed.
The Facebook feed has stopped.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's it.
What a jerk.
Can you start another one?
While you figure that out, Sarah, what book should we read of yours next?
Well, I don't have very many out. I am supposed to have a horror novel out from Omnium Gatherum, but because of the pandemic, I think it's a little delayed. And that one does currently have a hopeful ending, even though it's a horror novel. And then I have a collection of short stories that's out, and my friend Anton calls my horror cuddle horror. I'm not really sure what that means, but because I don't do a ton of splatterpunk, I don't do a lot of gore. Most of my horror is very like psychological, and several of the stories do have happy ending. And that collection is called Dead Girls Don't Love. So if you enjoyed this, then you'll probably like Dead Girls Don't Love.
Thank you so much. And Tracy says our Facebook feed is alive and well and still going.
Oh, good.
That is the good news. Excellent.
Yeah, I've got it up. I've just checked. It's still running as well.
Yeah, I can see it up in the corner. It says it is. So.
Good. Excellent. Well, we've had some technical difficulties in the past. So, it's a relief. Thank you very much, Sarah. Right. So, were there any other questions? Oh, yeah. Tracy is very excited about cuddle horror as a genre, by the by.
Right. I have a question, and it comes from my cats going, why were there not cats in this? We feel we were left out.
You know, that's so funny because I was just having a conversation with my partner the other day about rewriting Alien from the point of view of Jonesy.
Yes.
Because I just think that would be really fun as an experiment to write about like the cat, and they're like trying to help the humans. Like, come on, we'll just get in this air duct and we'll be fine. And the humans don't ever listen.
I am totally here for that.
It's reminding me of the Cat Who series I've been reading recently, and it's like that. It's like Coco spends half the book going, "The murder was committed by this weapon. Will you not listen to me? Come on."
Right.
I used to read those when I was much younger. I should maybe get back to them because I really enjoyed them a lot.
You might enjoy The Hollow Kingdom, which is the zombie apocalypse written from the point of view of a crow and his dog.
Nice.
I have that book. I just haven't gotten to read it yet.
Very funny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it.
Can't do zombies.
No zombies.
Oh, well, then you will not like Sherry Priest steampunk books as a warning, although I love them.
I've actually got them, I just haven't read them because probably the zombies.
There are many zombies.
I have to go. Toodles.
Goodbye, Cindy.
Bye-bye.
Cindy.
Next time.
All the way from Canada. It's so good to have you.
Thanks for
Um,
joining us.
Owl Kingdom's more a comedy. It's a horror in some ways, but more a comedy, I would say.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, so
Oh,
here's
from the
my
comments, Tracy says, I'm in favor of Starship Troopers with giant kittens as the baddies.
No, kittens are good.
No,
Kittens are
kittens
good.
are the
Right?
heroes.
The kittens have to be the good
I've
guys.
got
Yes.
a 40s
No.
episode going through my head now.
No, if
That would
was
be-
written Starship Troopers, the humans would all die because they'd be like, okay, and I mean they were only marginally competent to begin with. But if it was kittens, you get the smart ones going, wait, we can figure you humans out. You will not take us and then do experiments on us. Oh no, oh no. We will eat
And they'd
you
be
alive.
much too cute. The humans would want to kill them.
also true.
So
Also,
You
that
need
might
to
be a real
read
problem.
you need to read the Kazin series by CJ Cherry, where they're giant cats and they're from like tigers and lions and leopards, and they're just it's just pure space fantasy, but the cats are just it's just great.
That sounds really fun.
in the 80s.
I read them.
But those Alicia, those are sorts of beautiful, wonderful, older science fiction. I remember reading them when I was quite
I
young.
think they're on my shelf somewhere.
Yeah, no, I loved them. I used to pick them up whenever I had a little bit of pocket money. So, any other questions? Do raise your hands if I missed you previously. Anyone?
I do actually.
Yes, Alicia.
I had a question in terms of the characters. Did you intentionally, I guess the problem I had with the story was that I didn't really like any of the characters. They all seemed, with the exception of Susanna, they were jerks. It wasn't like reading Natava's Covenant. It wasn't like reading Covenant. Nothing's like reading Covenant.
Ugh.
Except for Mirror of Her Dreams. Don't read either right now. Please don't.
It's been a long time since I've read those. I barely remember them anymore.
It took me 4 years to read them. Because it just, but I don't know why. I just found, with the exception of Susanna, all the other characters were just horrible and unlikable. I don't know if that was intentional or is it just my perception of reading it.
I think Elspeth, I intentionally sort of wrote as not a very likable person, partly because Elspeth, the paladin that is inhabiting this automaton, is sort of cut off from humanity. Like inhabiting an automaton has made her kind of robotic. And also because she's on a mission. She has a job to do. She doesn't care about you. She doesn't care about your tiny, petty human problems. She has like all of humanity to save, to get out of the way. If you're not on board, she'll find somebody else. So she's just very mission oriented, and that can come off as very callous. And then Archie, I feel like, is just kind of a product of his time, that he's just a little bit sexist, and he's probably a little bit racist. Like, he's just that white dude who sort of bumbled his way to success. He's a really good engineer, but I think at the time I was working at an engineering firm as an administrative assistant. So he's kind of based on all the engineers that I worked with, who were lovely people who could design a building, they could design a bridge and it wouldn't fall down, but they couldn't figure out how the copier works, right? So yes, I see all the women nodding like, yes, that is exactly the thing, right? So Archie's like this really sweet guy who's really good with mechanical things, but people not as much. But he is really well-intentioned and he is a good guy under there. He's a really good husband and like really loves Susanna.
Which is weird because the engineers always throw better parties than the chemist, hands down, without question. But
yeah, my boss would always would buy us Christmas lunch, and that was my favorite time of the whole year because he would have a few glasses of wine and turn into this really entertaining person all of a sudden. And so we would all just get completely trashed at our company Christmas parties. And it was so much fun. But the other, 364 days a year, everyone was very like buttoned down, like we have to do the math. We're gonna go do math. Like, yeah. So I can see engineer parties being really fun.
Yeah. At uni, the engineers used to pull apart cars, put them on top of the roof, and have their yearly a paper plane competition from the top of a 3-story building to see how far it could go. So
yep.
Yeah, partied hard, but they were, yeah.
University engineers have much more fun than corporate engineers, I think, is the lesson.
Geologists are the best.
Yes. Cindy, Cindy Joy, you had your hand up with a question. Would you like to share?
Yeah, I wanted to know what anthology this originally came from and if it was still available.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it came from the Crimson Pact. So the 3 stories came from volumes 1, 2, and 4. So there are 4 volumes. I don't know if they're still available. If you can't find them, send me an email and I may be able to get you ebook copies from the publisher. He no longer publishes, but I would almost certainly, if you can't find them on Amazon, I can probably get you a PDF or something. So just, yeah, so just let me know.
Thank you, Sarah. Excellent. Wonderful. I suspect a few of us would like to read the anthologies. So, and
Great.
Yes, Karen, yes, please.
So I just realized that's you.
Yeah, I edited that.
Have a
Yeah.
paperback copy.
Yay.
I was the person that said, please, can I have a paperback copy? What I did want to say was I thought it was nice the fact that you put human hearts into the automaton. You use that because the Victorians had this whole thing about where does the soul reside and how heavy is it and stuff like that. So I thought it was interesting that you had to put a piece of a human in there to get this demon going in there as well. So I just thought that was because I did have a bit of a fetish about the human soul.
They did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and I was going to ask, why you decided to do first person present, but you've answered that one. But why did you have at the beginning Elspeth as first person present, but at the end you had present, but she wasn't first person?
Or
was that?
I don't remember. I'm sorry. It was too long ago.
If you've done it that, you must have had a reason. I'm going, what? Because
I think probably it was an attempt to at the end to wrap up with everyone. Yeah. You know what I mean? To have the ending not be in one particular person's head, because I wanted you to see all the characters since it was the end. But yeah, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that's another question too, because I was going to say, how was this an early story? And it's 10 years ago, so that makes it.
Yeah.
Why was it so short? Because I think if you'd fleshed it out, it could have become a novel, and I think I probably would have enjoyed it more with more of the internals and stuff, because I felt for me, it went too fast, as in I didn't get time to get to know the characters for me well enough. So I wasn't invested in them as much. Probably, I think it comes down to I don't do first person present. I think that was a big issue. But that's
and honestly, you've
my problem.
Like my partner reads everything that I write. He's my first reader, and he his big criticism is always, well, but I want more. And I'm like, but I'm bored and I've moved on. Like, that story's done.
But knowing now that it was part of an anthology makes sense, that it was short stories and anthology. It sort of ends,
Right. And I think so. I was only diagnosed with ADHD about 5 years ago. So I've only been on medication for about 5 years. And so it has really made it possible for me to write something that's longer. My stories have been getting longer again. And now I'm actually able to force myself to follow an outline to write something that's long. Back then, there was no way. So mooching three
see
short
all that
stories together was the best hope I had of writing
That all
something
makes
long.
sense because when you're saying it's short story anthology, 3 parts, I'm going, oh, that makes so much more sense now.
Yeah, and then it's really hard to revisit something that's from so long ago. I didn't want to add a bunch of stuff to it because I felt like it wouldn't fit. It would be too jarring. And once I started moving things around and like rewriting things, that's a rabbit hole that might never end. So I was like, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to put it in one book together and because once I open that Pandora's box, who knows where we're going to end up.
Yeah, knowing all that now, it actually explains so much because I kept saying, why in my head. I kept going, why? And now it sort of makes sense now.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Sarah. Excellent question. So we are coming up at the end of our time together, everyone. And I always like to leave you with the next book. The event page is already live for October. So next month's book and guest author is David Lee Summers, a dear friend. And we are reading his novella, Revolution of Air and Rust. You can find out more information about that on the event page. Sarah, thank you for being here so much. It's been so lovely speaking with you. We are plotting many ridiculous activities virtually for October and Halloween. So this really was the perfect, terrifying book to read going into October. Really, maybe one of the scariest things I've ever read of my own accord. Beautifully written, so interesting. I look forward to reading more things by you. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Sarah, if you have a moment at the end, I'd love to thank you in private as well. Everyone else, thank you so much for being here with us for book club.
Thank you. Email me if you have any other questions.
Thank you. We will meet again next month, October, the third Sunday of the month, which is a date, Sunday, October 18th at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, as usual. Thank you all for being here. We will see you online.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.